At the outbreak of World War II, the Nazi air fleet included some of the most iconic aircraft in military history. And probably the most iconic of all was a large, odd-shaped dive bomber, officially known as the Ju-87, but remembered today by its nickname, the Stuka. The Stuka was a key component of early German successes. In Poland, France and Dunkirk, the Stuka terrorised the Allies and came to symbolise the brutal simplicity of blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The Stuka was a formidable dive bomber, capable of launching near-vertical attacks on enemy targets with pinpoint precision, and heralding its arrival on the battlefield with a terrifying wail that caused panic on the ground. In 1940, it seemed that nothing could stop the Stuka. But as the war progressed, Allied pilots found an antidote to the scourge of the Stuka. The Stuka's ungainly size and fixed undercarriage made it slow and deadly vulnerable to agile fighter aircraft. In the Battle of Britain, Stukas were shot down in droves, and the aircraft was quickly withdrawn from the front lines. The myth of the all-conquering Stuka had been shattered. But in other theatres that had less fighter cover, the Stuka added to its fearsome reputation, as it spearheaded advances in Greece, Yugoslavia, and North Africa. Against the Russians, the Stuka was a vital part of Nazi operations throughout the war, and continued to terrorise ground troops until the fall of Berlin. During World War II, more than 6,000 Stukas were built, which served in every European theatre of the war. Today, only 2 original Stukas survive. One of these is displayed at the Royal Air Force Museum in London and is one of the rarest aircraft in the world. I explored it up close with curator Tom Hopkins.
Tom, the Stuka is, you'd have to say, one of the most iconic aircraft from the Second World War, particularly for those early days. If we think Battle of Britain, we think the Germans invading Russia. There's always a Stuka in the footage. Why is this such an iconic aircraft?
Well, I think it's the size of it. It's a big aircraft. The shape as well. There's something really menacing about this inverted gull wing. And I think the sound as well. Not only that big engine up the front, but the undercarriage were fitted with these devices called Jericho trumpets.
Yeah, now I've heard about this, and this is the thing that everyone remembers. I think this sound is actually used universally as the sound of a diving aircraft, is this screeching, wailing noise.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a natural sound, was it? It was something that the Germans deliberately generated.
Deliberately as a psychological weapon.
So they fitted horns to the undercarriage?
Yeah. And this scream, I mean, everybody would recognise it instantly. And to hear that, and you know these bombers are coming, it must have been absolutely terrifying in those early stages of blitzkrieg, and the Germans just erupted and conquered everything.
The Germans seemed to be good at that, didn't they? The understanding, and I know good at it is not the right term, it's a horrific thing we're talking about, but the psychology of warfare as well. The idea of blitzkrieg wasn't just, let's have a strong army, air force. Let's not just be strong militarily, let's be strong in propaganda. Let's really shock and awe, let's overwhelm people. And the Jericho trumpets were a great example of that, weren't they?
Yeah, definitely.
And the interesting thing I think about the Stuka is iconic as it is, particularly with the Battle of Britain. It wasn't particularly effective in the Battle of Britain, was it? It didn't do the job that the Germans wanted it to do.
No, so this is the thing. Early stages of the war, invasions of Poland, Low Countries, France, it does its job. Comes to the Battle of Britain, and suddenly it's got all of these shortcomings when it's facing Hurricanes and Spitfires, the latest RAF fighters at the time. The fact is, it's just quite slow. It's got a poor defensive armament. It's a big lumbering beast, easy to spot, easy to intercept. The loss rates it suffered when it was trying to bomb British targets during the Battle of Britain were horrific. And the Germans quickly learned that they just couldn't sustain it, and it was withdrawn from the theatre in the West.
Well, I suppose those elements that make it a good dive bomber, slow in the air so that it was a stable platform to drop a big bomb from, those are exactly the same things that would make it a big target for a nimble fighter.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it.
But after the Battle of Britain, it still was used for the remainder of the war, and we saw a lot of these on the Eastern Front, didn't we?
We did. Eastern Front, the Soviets had much less a sense of their superiority, didn't have the same capabilities that the RAF had in the West. So the Stuka was still relatively effective there and in use as that dive bomber attacking Russian armour. And in fact, this variant is quite interesting. It's a G2, a tank buster. It would originally have been fitted with these large 37mm cannon pods. Sadly, we don't have them anymore. On each wings, that's a big round. You see something like that, caliber like that, literally shooting up tanks.
Well, it's still got the tank busting.
It does, yeah. If we look round to the
let's do that. Show us some characteristics of this plane.
Yeah,
that make it so special.
Howling there. You can see the tank buster insignia. I guess the most iconic thing is this what's known as an inverted gull wing, where it comes down before going back up, and there's several reasons for that. It's got a big prop on this big engine, and it just gives you a bit more clearance from the ground, which helps. But the other thing is, it helps to accommodate big bomb like this.
That is a big bomb.
Yeah. And again, you've got the prop there, and you think about a dive bomber. It's not being released like that. This will be going straight down, and if that falls straight down as well with it, it's going to hit that prop. So interestingly, it's got this crutch here. When it's released, that swings down, and then the bomb is clear of that prop to go out.
Absolutely extraordinary. Let's come around this side and have a look at it. I want to see it all in its glory. Tom, I heard a story that may or may not be true. Maybe you can shed some light on it. But the pressures this put on the pilot during a dive meant that it had an auto pull-out feature. Is this correct? That it would pull itself out of the dive?
That's right. So the human body, when it's experienced a high G-force, a number of nasty things happen to it. The first thing is known as grey out, when your vision literally fades to a grey fuzz. And you know you're in trouble then, because you go a bit further and then you black out, you're unconscious. And that is a problem when you're going into that dive. It's quite a violent maneuver. They actually flew on their backs first and then went down like that. It's easier to pull out. But yeah, many of them did black out while pulling those maneuvers. So it was fitted with a device to automatically pull it out of a dive.
That's absolutely extraordinary. I always loved the combination of the old technology and what at the time was absolutely brand new, cutting edge technology.
Yeah.
It's an incredible plane.
Of course, we've got the fixed undercarriage here with these spats. Made it quite rugged in the field, also cheaper to produce, less moving parts to go wrong. That was where these Jericho trumpets were fitted, but that's going to create a lot of drag. So slow top speed, but in a dive, you're going down, your target below you, you want not to zoom towards it, but to almost float in the air whilst you get the correct position for your bombs to drop on target. So they contributed, but the main thing were these massive flaps and dive brakes at the back here. Much bigger than you would see on a conventional fighter aircraft.
Absolutely. You get a whole different perspective even when you see it from this side, from the back. I mean, we're lucky enough to be coming across and inspecting this closely, and it's quite different. From the front, it's this lumbering beast, but it's quite sleek from this angle, isn't it? Particularly with the gull wings.
Yeah.
Quite extraordinary.
Because the other thing is it had 2 crew members. That's going to make it slower as well, a bit more weight. You've got radio operator at the back, and he's got early variants. He'd have a single 7.92mm machine gun. How effective is that going to be as a defensive weapon? I think it was found out in the Battle of Britain. Not
very.
Yeah.
Not very. You said the word before, Tom, rugged, and I think that's an important thing because it reflects before the Second World War the concept of how that war would be fought. The idea that you would have, I suppose it's a blitzkrieg philosophy, isn't it? That you'd have very fast-moving armies capturing large tracts of ground, and a key part of that is they needed air support, and therefore the expectation was they would be building makeshift airfields pretty quickly as they went along, and aircraft would be flying in and supporting them. If you're carving an airfield out of a farmer's paddock, you're going to need an aircraft that can stand up to landing in those rough conditions.
The Germans really understood that concept of what we now call close air support, what would have been understood as perhaps army cooperation back then, but to have their aircraft right on the front line, able to support those forces on the ground. And you're not going to have lovely concrete runways with lovely facilities to service your aircraft. It's going to be rough and ready, and the Stuka was built for those conditions.
It's always a trade-off, isn't it, in warfare? No matter how much I look at the history of warfare, there's always a trade-off. If you want an aircraft that can be an effective dive bomber, that is going to be able to stand up to those rough and ready forward airfields, it's also going to necessarily be big, heavy and slow, which was exactly the worst thing you wanted, attacking airfields over Britain during the Battle of Britain. And these were a huge target for the Spitfires, and the Hurricanes in particular took a lot of them down.
And they were much faster than it, and they could catch it, and it had that one machine gun firing backwards, and they had 8 machine guns firing forwards. So who's going to win in that confrontation?
Tom, you're incredibly lucky to work with these wonderful aircraft every day. This is an iconic aircraft. Why is it so important to the RAF Museum to have such a great example of the Stuka in the collection?
Well, it helps us tell that story of the German success in the early stages of Blitzkrieg, and how the Battle of Britain stopped that process in its tracks. Germans unable to gain air superiority over Britain, and the rest we know.
Absolutely. I mean, this is an example of why Germany was never likely to win the Battle of Britain. Their technology wasn't up to speed. To do what they needed to do to gain air superiority over Britain just wasn't going to occur, and this is a fantastic example of that, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.